Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. I am so pleased with who I have here on the podcast today. For full disclosure, you are old friends, let's say old family friends. I'm here with Terence Ward and Idanna Pucci. Idanna, you are very beloved to my father. You were his student at Columbia, and all he does is talk about you, and and
Yes.
also, yeah, he does. He loves you, and he probably, I shouldn't say it on the air, but he always says, Idanna was my favorite student, things like that.
Well, he was a professor that still is in my mind and my heart.
Yeah, he loves you, and you love him. And then, of course, Terry, he adores because of your book on Caravaggio, and he's got so he adores the two of you. And for me personally, having you on the podcast is really a pleasure. And I know this episode is going to bring him and hopefully many other people great
lovely
joy. So Terence Ward and Idanna Pucci are authors and cultural historians whose nonfiction works explore social justice and cross-cultural exchange. Ward, you were raised in Tehran, while, of course, Idanna, you grew up here in Florence. And you witnessed the creativity of your uncle, Emilio Pucci, the inspiration for your new book. You also worked for him in New York before traveling extensively across Asia and Europe. You are both extremely prolific authors and have written on pretty much every subject imaginable. But today specifically, we are going to be talking about your first book together, which I'm really also curious to dig into what that process looked like. And the book is called Emilio Pucci, The Astonishing Odyssey of a Fashion Icon. It's published by St. Martin's Press. It was released just this past February. It is a thrilling read. And I think it is really an astonishing book in addition to an astonishing odyssey, because I do not think that anyone, myself included, expected that behind this fashion icon was such an incredible story steeped in World War II history. So it's a fascinating read. I wanted to thank you for coming on the podcast today. And I would love to just dive right in. What do you say?
Wonderful.
You ready?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, of course.
So as I sort of mentioned in the intro, Emilio Pucci is often reduced to print and color, but he lived so many lives. So could tell us more about his astonishing odyssey and what prompted you to write this incredible story in the first place?
Well, I'll answer very briefly to this. First of all, I don't think he had many lives. He had 2 lives.
Okay.
But in his inner being, he had so many different dimensions of his creativity and imagination. And one dimension was the one who made him survive this terrible ordeal that he experienced during the war because of his principles. And so it is because of his incredible imagination, flexibility of mind, and also humanity that he managed to survive. So this is the core of his being that I think runs throughout the book. And this is also why, it was such a magnetic attraction to write about him.
Mm-hmm. Did you know? I mean, let's dig a little deeper. I mean, this was your uncle.
Yes.
And you speak about this. His life is really incredibly inspiring. But did you know all of this while you were growing up?
Now, whatever I've just said, I really had. Well, when I was growing up, because I grew up in that. The family, this Pucci family is quite old. Is one of the several families who sort of made, in a way, Florence, or helped making the Florence we know today. But I saw him as an artist because I knew nothing about his first life. Just after the war, nobody spoke about the war. And those who had experienced really terrible things or deep, had witnessed just horrendous things, didn't speak about them. So the children that grew up just after the war just saw, for instance, I saw him as an artist, as a designer, very glamorous, especially in that palazzo, which was not terribly glamorous. Foreigners have this idea that to grow up in a palace like this is the most incredible thing in the world. Well, it may be kind of gloomy and depressing because not only especially this palazzo is just under the Duomo, and the Duomo is a very, very oppressive presence for a child that is growing up, and especially at 6:00 in the afternoon, when these powerful bells, ancient bells, that were not now they are, you push a button and they go, At that time, you must imagine a human being ringing these bells, pulling these incredible ancient ropes, and so this oppressive sound at 6:00 that really made you think. I remember many times I would think, how am I going to get out of here?
Wow.
And I mean it, this really happened. So whatever I learned, I had a sense that he was a very unusual uncle compared to my friends in school. I went to the public school, the local school in Santa Croce. And compared to that was so fantastic about Italy, is that there were all these public schools, elementary, high school, and you were mixed with everybody. My friend was the daughter of the baker of Santa Croce, and we went along, we didn't, she didn't judge me and I didn't judge her, but I knew that my uncle was different. And even my father, they were different from their parents. So whatever I learned about what I said, this multidimensional, I really learned through all the research we did after.
Okay. Let's talk about the research, Terry. Let's turn to you for a second. So this book, this is a spy thriller. This is not what people expected. I thought, what kind of fascinating life could Pucci have had before he became one of the most iconic fashion designers of all time, dressing the most famous stars of Hollywood? I had no idea. So you start digging into the archives, and I actually heard an interview with you, which is fascinating, about these files, these totally disorderly files of just chaos, pure chaos in Maryland, and how you managed to find gold in these archives. So tell us about this moment of discovery and what you found out.
Yeah, so the drama in the research was that we had to, number one, receive a clue, which we actually found in a small book that was self-published that cited a title that was called the Report of Marchese Emilio Pucci and his connection with the Ciano diaries. Now, for most of listeners today, we probably don't know what Ciano diaries means, but essentially, this was the inside recordings of every meeting that Mussolini and Hitler had in their very tumultuous relationship, which means that Mussolini was not a partner in the so-called Axis. He was a servant, and he was treated like that. And all the Italians felt that. In fact, very few Italians wanted to go into the war. This was something that Mussolini decided on impulse. To have this reality exposed, all of that was so dangerous for both Mussolini and Hitler that they wanted to grab these diaries and destroy them. They had been written by the foreign minister, who happened to be, like Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Mussolini. So they're very graphic, and they're deeply troubling, highly embarrassing. And what happened in Emilio's life is that he was approached by Mussolini's daughter to help her take these diaries and to deliver them to the Allies. He knew that he was the only person who could help her. Her husband was on death row. Imagine Trump putting Kushner on death row. He would soon be executed. So in this journey, Emilio finds himself from being a World War II pilot, a bomber pilot who's decorated, survived all sorts of missions, and then all of a sudden he's thrown into this John le Carré thriller where he's trying to help, yes, Ada Mussolini escape, but also these diaries are going to change history. And we really sincerely believe he knew this because he had been educated in America. He knew the other way of viewing this war. And in his journey, this John le Carré spy thriller opens up with him being asked by her to help her with these diaries, to get them into American hands. Where are the Americans? In Geneva, in Bern, in the capital of Switzerland. Who is it? Alan Dulles, who would then become the head of the CIA. And so this whole story revolves around this backstory of Emilio that was always secret. It was untold. It was a hidden history. And partly because of what Idanna said, that nobody wanted to talk about this, but also it was so complicated. At that time, Italy was divided in two. There were the Repubblichini of the neo-fascists. There was the partisans. There was a civil war. No matter what you did, people pointed and accused. He took it on himself to defy both Hitler, the SS, Mussolini, everyone, and put his life at risk. Not only did the diaries end up in Dulles's hands in Bern that he arranged, but he had been captured by the Gestapo, tortured by the SS and the Gestapo for a number of days, and miraculously escaped through a German double spy. But the whole point is, at the end, a report was asked to be written. And we found this in the middle of the archives of the OSS in Maryland. And that was the trigger which Emilio wrote his own story. And we used it in the book to help narrate us through this tale.
No, I wanted
Idanna,
to say that the husband of Ada Mussolini, Galeazzo Ciano, who wrote the diaries, was executed because of his role in the downfall of Mussolini. So he was treated as a traitor.
Yeah.
And this is very important. It's a Greek tragedy in which the father executes the son-in-law, father of his 3 grandchildren. It's really, and Galeazzo Ciano, in his dying days, he said, these must go into the hands of the Allies, and the reason why we consider this an untold story is because in Italy, there's been all this gossip after the war. Nobody has spoken about Emilio saving, because it just so happens that she had the diaries. So it was a conjunction between saving the daughter of Mussolini and saving the diaries. And what these Italians, journalists, after the war, even there was, fiction on Rai. There are 2 books around now that were published a few years later that absolutely don't talk about his role in the Ciano diaries. Only talk about a relationship with Edda, the daughter of Mussolini, to discredit him. And to turn him into a pure fascist. You see?
Which he was not.
No, he grew up in the epoch of fascism, but America changed him.
Right.
And he started to have doubts, and it's much more interesting a person who transforms himself through a conscience, and realizes that, that he has principles, where his principles are in action, can be in action. And the fact is that we discovered, by finding this, and it was an odyssey in itself to find it, that the main reason why he saved Edda Ciano was the diaries. Even though he had a relationship with her of great friendship, because she was a very intelligent, well-read person. And but we don't know. We have no proof, neither from her side nor from his side, that he had a romance with her. You see, that he had a romantic thing.
But we do know that these diaries that Emilio gave to Dulles, made sure that they would arrive in Dulles' hand, ended up being the anchor for the Nuremberg Trials. Incredible. Without them, there's no way that the Allies could accuse the Germans of simply following orders, because that's what they were doing. That was the defense. What these diaries showed is that the Italians, terrified of what was taking place before the war, this Axis was not a partnership, but rather the Germans had planned this war ahead of time. And that is the touchstone, the beginning of international law. If you engage in a war that you have pre-planned while having false negotiations, that is in itself the first war crime. And all we have to do is flash to today, and we understand that the same thing happened about a month ago. That war was planned. That is the anchor for international law. So Emilio sacrifices himself, puts his life on the line to deliver to the Allies the testimony, the pure testimony of the foreign minister who was there as a witness in the room with these two monsters. And that is what convicts Ribbentrop, his rival foreign minister, the German Nazi foreign minister, and it convicts the others.
And this report...
I just want to add something to this. If a man commits a murder planned, it's premeditated murder. So this is a 360 degree. It's the same thing between nations.
Yes.
You see, this is why they were, it's part of, it's a real criminal act of a nation that premeditates to bomb another nation.
Yeah. Right.
Go ahead. No, so Emilio actually is a key figure it's almost like a Forrest Gump moment where he is literally in front of the most powerful men of the day. They're searching for him and they want to kill him. He has a price on his head, dead or alive. And that is where the story really turns into that spy thriller. No one knew this because the report he was asked to write by Dulles, just as the war ended, in return for a letter to go back to Italy, saying that he had helped the Allies. That report was classified and later classified by the CIA, not to be seen by anybody until after he died. So he never even saw what he had written as his testimony. It was totally top secret, and he could never share this with anyone because he never got the letter from Dulles, did he? Dulles betrayed him as well. So you have this, back to Idanna's idea of the principles that he carried. This was a very painful secret he had to keep all his life. He couldn't share it with anyone.
Well, I don't know.
In the same sense,
I think it was not. My father knew.
Yes,
but I think it was not really purposely kept a secret. It's just that it was such a complicated story.
Yes,
and the pain and the suffering that he had gone through,
and the betrayal,
and the
by the Americans,
and also when a man is betrayed, he loses face automatically, you know, and so you know, and the reason he was caught by the Gestapo after, when he returned from smuggling the diaries out and Idanna Ciano out, and he was caught and tortured for about 10 days. Very interesting, his view on torture, you know, because they wanted to know where the diaries were. Mm-hmm. They wanted to know where she was and where the diaries were. And what he said about torture is really incredibly interesting, that one never thinks about. But we happen to think that even today, people who are tortured have the same, reaction. He said that the pain, the physical pain, is secondary. Even if your body is really, really damaged, you know, like his skull was broken in several places. But the pain is that you are constantly afraid because you lose consciousness and you go back, that you've spoken, that you've revealed. Yeah. And this is something that is so deep in a man of principles, and a man that he would be dragged into the torture chamber, and the only thing he thought was to try and look on the desk. They kept a log, and he would see that that was blank, that he hadn't spoken, you know. But I think this is what they go through now, even those who are.
I think so too. That incredible strength of your convictions. In other words, he knew that he held this incredible key to an understanding of what had really gone down.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's mind-blowing.
And add on that, look at the transformation. With those principles, there were so many people after the war. What happens after the war? As soon as the big man, the strong man collapses, as soon as that fear, as soon as this self-censorship that every American's going through today, they're all afraid to talk on the phone. Are they being tapped? Once that is over, look at what happens in Italy. All of these people with principles come forward, not the yes men, not those terrible little weasels who were all part of the collaboration, but rather they come forward and all of a sudden there's light and there's an explosion of creativity. Strong man falls, the flowers start to bloom, just like we see here in Florence today. And he is part of that whole reconstruction, that whole reimagining of what Italy can be. Without the fear, without the autocrat, without all of this combattere, obbedire, credere, all of these fascist notions are gone. Italy is free, and that's when the great rebirth begins.
I want to talk about this. So this is a man who lived an incredible life. And something that you speak of, Idanna, is the fact that he was always... he was a lover of life. I mean, notwithstanding the ugliness and the torture that he experienced and bore witness to, right? So he also had the true spirit of a creative, but also an entrepreneur, and sort of always kind of fell into opportunities. Can you talk a little about how he sort of accidentally became this, most well-known Italian designer, somebody that today is even, experiencing this incredible renaissance. I think last summer was donned, was called the summer of Pucci or something. I mean, his designs are so beloved. His legacy is so real. How do you go from, being pretty much a spy and a key player in World War II to becoming a fashion designer? It just doesn't make sense.
First of all, I take it as a lesson of behavior and character, because he was positive all the time. And positivity attracts luck.
Yeah.
Attracts chance, because with positivity, you know that how to jump on the momentum, and go forward. And people are not attracted by victims, by victimization, or a person who feels sorry for himself. They are attracted by somebody positive. And this in everyday life, So he was a master of positivity. And also, things happened to him. They happened in a negative way, a negative thing, but they happened in a positive thing. And I think that he could see, there was no polymoda. There was no. Nowadays, if you don't have a diploma in a fashion school, you can't even practically find a job as a salesperson in a fashion shop. No, he was completely self-made, and he didn't even know he could draw. He really didn't know. He had one experience before. You can say that he started to be aware that he could do something in fashion, even though it wasn't really conscious, is because, in circumstances that are too long to explain, he ended up with a scholarship in America.
Right.
First to Georgia University of Georgia, and then that is we say rocambolesque. Could you have that term? It's an adventure.
Yeah.
Equal to some moments in the war. How he reached Reed College.
Right.
And in Reed College, he got free tuition because he didn't have any money. No money at all, because there was an embargo, the sanctions on Italy, because Mussolini had invaded Ethiopia, and his scholarship was discontinued. So he didn't have $1. He sold the ticket on the ship return ticket to Italy, and then all sorts of things. He managed to get into Reed College, but he got free tuition because he realized there was no ski team.
Yeah, this is a great story. Tell this story.
And he's a great skier.
Right.
In fact, he was faced in Italy with a big decision. That their turning moments in life. He was training for the Olympic ski team of Italy, and he had suddenly the scholarship, and he had to weigh the two things, and so he gave up the Olympics, and he said, "No, I have to go to America."